This is CBC Vancouver News.
Well, it tells me the safety regime in this province isn't where it needs to be.
Mourning the mother killed in this week's crane incident, while calls grow louder for stricter inspections and stronger enforcement. Plus,
I often get asked here, like, is the war still happening in Ukraine? And that honestly is like a knife through my heart.
2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine, and for some of the 20,000 who've come to BC, hope for peace is getting harder to come by. Also,
not only was a curler, but she was dedicated to the curling rink itself. I'm kind of proud.
celebrating 100 years of curling in the Kootenays, reflecting on how the pioneers of the sport have strengthened the community. Hi, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. We begin in Surrey, where one person has died in an early morning fire. It sparked up around 5 a.m. at a two-story home on 88th Avenue and 152nd Street. Nearly 20 firefighters responded to the scene in Fleetwood. After crews knocked down the initial fire, they searched the house. They found only one person inside who was already dead. Investigators are trying to figure out still what caused the fire. Well, stop work orders remain in place at a high-rise construction site in Vancouver's Oak Ridge neighborhood. It's where one worker died Wednesday when a load fell from a crane dozens of stories above. The fatality came a day after police recommended criminal charges in a Kelowna crane collapse that killed 5 people 3 years ago. Our David Ball has more on the growing calls for safer construction sites.
Flowers, candles, a simple wood cross. Amid the now silent construction site here at Oak Ridge, a reminder of a workplace tragedy that took place here on Wednesday and took the life of construction worker Eurydia Flores. She died when a load fell from a crane at this high-rise, falling an estimated 25 stories to the ground, hitting the unfinished building on its way down. WorkSafe BC continues its investigation into her death, telling CBC it ordered work to stop at the Oak Ridge Park development as it investigates the 3rd crane accident this year alone. Adding, quote, while each of the 3 incidents appear to be unique, employers are reminded of the need to be vigilant in ensuring the maintenance of their equipment and the safe working procedures of their staff. The International Union of Operating Engineers is calling for stronger inspections and enforcement at high-risk construction sites and better safety training.
Well, we need to see enforcement of the regulations that exist when it comes to the mandatory certification of tower crane operators, and we need to see licensing of the contractors that erect and dismantle tower cranes, and we need to establish minimum levels of training for people that do that work as well.
BC's Labour Minister says he'll leave no stone unturned in finding any safety gaps when it comes to construction cranes.
Every worker deserves to return home safely at the end of their shift. And in this particular case, or other crane incidents that we have seen this year, there might be some gaps, because obviously there must be something missing here, because we've seen 3 crane incidents this year in BC. That's not acceptable.
WorkSafe regulates the operation of tower cranes on work sites, but has proposed expanding the rules to include their installation and repositioning as well. That's little comfort to the latest victim's family, who say they are devastated to lose the mother of 2 from Acapulco. Flores' teenage son is organizing a fundraiser to bring his mother home to her native Mexico, saying he's grateful for the generosity of their community in this difficult time. David Ball, CBC News, Vancouver.
A reported gas leak at a downtown Vancouver high-rise drew quite a significant response from emergency crews this morning.
We have a full hazardous materials response on here. Just because of the proximity, the number of units that's inside and how many people could be potentially affected by the gas leak.
This was the scene around 11 a.m. on Richards and Smythe Streets. The gas was immediately shut off as a total of 12 crews worked to ventilate and evacuate the building. Responders met with evacuated residents to make sure no one was feeling ill. No injuries were reported. Crews say this is a reminder that if you smell gas, call 911 and leave the area right away. It has been 2 years since Russia invaded Ukraine. Leaders have gathered in Kyiv to mark the anniversary and to express solidarity with the Zelensky government. Among them, Justin Trudeau, who signed a massive new aid package today. The CBC's Margaret Evans reports on why Kyiv wants more help from the West.
This was a surprise visit. The Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arriving by train overnight with his Italian and Belgian counterparts and the President of the European Commission. It was a trip of solidarity at a time when Ukraine's fighting forces are really struggling to hold the Russians back. Their first stop with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky was the Hostomel airport, which is on the outskirts of Kyiv, and it's the site of a battle, or was the site of a battle on the very first day of the Russian invasion when Ukrainian fighters thwarted Russian plans to land troops and march on the capital.
Putin was sure he could easily take strategic targets like this airport. Well, we are standing here today because he was wrong.
Later, Prime Minister Trudeau signed a security cooperation agreement with the Ukrainian president, following in the footsteps of countries like France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands. It doesn't offer concrete security guarantees, but it does come with a pretty big price tag, $3.02 billion for this year.
Justin, Mr. Prime Minister, I thank you for the agreement that opens up new capabilities for our security cooperation.
Canada has yet to fulfill some of the promises already made to Ukraine in terms of military hardware, and today's agreement doesn't necessarily mean immediate relief for Ukraine in terms of the ammunition and air defense systems they so desperately need. People here really are very worried indeed that that kind of help, that military aid, is not going to arrive soon enough to help their soldiers trying to fight the Russian forces and keep them on the other side of that front line. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kyiv.
Well, meanwhile, about 1,000 Ukraine supporters somberly gathered outside the Vancouver Art Gallery today to mark those 2 years since the Russian invasion. Since then, roughly 20,000 Ukrainians who fled their country have settled here in BC. As Janella Hamilton reports, while the war continues to drag on, so too does the trauma.
One by one, sunflowers are laid on the front steps of the gallery, a symbol of peace and resilience.
Our soldiers continue holding our skies.
It's been 730 days since Russian forces invaded Ukraine, displacing more than 3.7 million people within the country and 6.5 million globally. Tetiana Polakova came to BC on an emergency travel visa. She says she's devastated knowing her family continues to wake up day after day in a raging war zone.
I often get asked here, like, is the war still happening in Ukraine? And that honestly is like a knife through my heart. I hope that people understand that the war is not over, and more than though, it's not better. Like, we are still experiencing so much heartache and so much destruction.
Olga Prodin has been traveling to Ukraine every 4 months to provide rehabilitation therapy to kids of military members who have died.
Sometimes we have kids who are wearing non-stop boots. It's smelly, it's summertime. We are joking, you have to change your shoes. But then we figure out that this boots was his dad boots, and who fall fighting against Russia. And that's why kids are deeply traumatized.
I mean, I've known children that left hell, basically, you know, that left places like Mariupol. And that's something that will stay with a child their whole life.
While it is unclear exactly how many children have been forcibly deported to Russia or occupied regions in Ukraine, rally organizers say it ranges in the thousands.
I would say that the situation is worse in terms of how people are feeling in Ukraine than it was like a year ago.
That feeling of despair echoed by this group of Russian community members standing in solidarity with Ukraine.
I moved out of Russia in 1995, but still care. I still want to make sure that my roots are clean, and what's going on has been absolute devastation.
This rally, one of many across the province, dozens of people also gathering at Centennial Square in Victoria.
You can all make a difference.
Polakova says seeing the sea of Ukrainian flags renews her hope that one day soon she will be able to return home to her family. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
On Vancouver Island, the search for a mother who went missing 9 days ago is intensifying after her vehicle was found off a remote logging road.
I think it's a good chance. There's a lot of people in there looking, and there is lots of people that are in on SUVs and quads.
Sarah Sherry was last seen traveling on Northwest Bay Road. Searchers found her pickup truck yesterday. It was discovered in a ditch off this logging road about 20 kilometers from where she was last seen. Researchers say a compassion club that was shut down by police last fall was significantly reducing overdoses. The study, carried out in part by researchers at UBC, has now become part of an international journal. The research found that the Drug User Liberation Front, or DULF, was able to help reduce overdoses by nearly 50%.
I think it's really no surprise that that's a safer approach for people, that their overdose risk, whether it's non-fatal or fatal, will go down. Because essentially what you're doing is you're providing consumer safety.
Two of the other study authors were arrested in October when the Compassion Club was raided by Vancouver police. That cut short the study after 14 months. 47 participants took part in all. They were sold thoroughly tested cocaine, heroin, and meth. Well, this weekend, Vancouver is hosting a Rugby Sevens tournament that's bringing audiences from all around the world. Organizers are hoping to take this opportunity to highlight the partnership with local First Nations communities.
It just allows us to take a little bit of our local culture and showcase to the rest of the world.
This year's event features a Musqueam-designed gold medal by local artist Aileen Sparrow, as well as a lighting display featuring traditional Musqueam weaving designs. The three-day tournament features 24 teams competing in 64 matches. The event wraps up tomorrow. On to the Kootenays, and the Kimberley Curling Club has turned 100 this weekend. The club celebrated its centennial with a bonspiel, and members reminisced about the rich history of the sport in that community. Before today's celebration, our Corey Bullock headed to the Kimberley Heritage Museum to learn more.
At the museum in Kimberley, Sam Callis reflects on his mother, Ada Callis, and her many achievements.
I'm kind of proud.
Ada was one of 4 women who put Kimberley on the curling map. She played third on the Ina rink, having represented BC many times with the team.
She was extraordinary. She not only was a curler, but she was dedicated to the curling rink itself.
The Ina rink won the national championships in 1962 and 1964, making it into the Canadian Curling Hall of Fame. But curling in Kimberley got its start in the 1920s.
There was about 3,500 people living here in about 1926. Winter's long, there's no television, so people got out and participated, in all kinds of sports and activities, curling being one.
The club has moved locations many times over the years, and in 1964, the city built the building that the club calls home today.
I think a lot of people are reminiscing just, about spending time there and just the people they knew, maybe they've passed on, but, people they knew that were in curling and, just that it was fun thing to do.
Past President John McGilvery says the centennial is a huge accomplishment.
I think it's fantastic that we've managed to survive 100 years. We're hoping that curling will continue to be an active sport here in Kimberley.
Today, the club hosts around 135 members, and this weekend, they celebrated.
I think people are pretty excited. They're all happy to be sharing in the celebrations, and it's just a fun sport, so people are having a fun Saturday, enjoying the day.
Sims is hopeful the club will be able to continue throwing stones for another 100 years. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Kimberley.
A Tahltan beater traveled 2 days from her home near the BC-Yukon border to watch Ice Cube perform in Abbotsford. She beaded a medallion for the rapper, who ended the night wearing it around his neck. Check it out.
Thank you for whoever made this. I appreciate it.
That was like a dream come true. Like, I really, really wanted to go see him, and I really wanted to gift that to him.
Just waking up in the morning, gotta thank.
Beading's my passion. I do it like every day. I started the medallion on Tuesday, and I didn't finish it until 3 in the morning, Sunday morning, the day we were leaving. There was this silhouette that I found online that I really liked of him, and he's a Raiders fan. One of his backdrops on one of his older concerts, he had a clip art of his face in that Raiders logo, and I thought that was going to be cool, so that's kind of how I started with that. Like halfway through the show, I told my friend, I'm like, you know, if he never ever gets this, it doesn't matter. Like, I had such an awesome time here at the show. Like, he's awesome live. And then my daughter just said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to throw it. So she threw it. I was like, oh my God. Just started freaking out, especially when he walked back and picked it up. And to have somebody as iconic as Ice Cube wearing a piece of my art that's just like a dream come true.
Up next, Donald Trump moves one step closer to getting the presidential nomination as he beats Nikki Haley in the South Carolina Republican primary. We'll have all the details when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In international news, the body of Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny has been returned to his family. Navalny died 9 days ago at a remote northern penal colony. Reports said his body would be held until his mother agreed there would be no public funeral. It's not clear what arrangements are being made or if the family will request an independent examination. Israel's war cabinet was briefed today on the latest truce talks held this week in Paris. Ahead of the briefing, officials said they believed there was progress, but Palestinian officials say Hamas remains firm in its demand for a permanent ceasefire, something Israel has so far rejected. It comes as there were more Israeli strikes in Gaza today. 8 people died when an air attack struck Rafah. That's the city where Israel says it's planning a ground offensive and where more than half of Gaza's population is now sheltering. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry today elevated the death toll to more than 29,600, with almost 70,000 wounded. Well, 2 winters ago, Canada was stunned by 4 deaths at the U.S. border during a Manitoba snowstorm. Well, now American authorities have made an arrest and laid charges, accusing the suspect of organizing that trek. A couple from India was trying to cross illegally into the U.S. With them, their 2 children, ages 11 and 3. They were all found 12 meters from the border, frozen to death. The suspect will appear Wednesday in a Minnesota court. In politics, Donald Trump has scored another victory in the U.S. primary race, taking South Carolina tonight. Trump looked set to take nearly 60% of the vote. It piles even more pressure on Nikki Haley, Trump's only remaining rival, to drop out of the race. Haley, though, said she will still be on the ballot for 15 Republican primaries March 5th. To politics in our country, and health experts are reacting to the deal reached between the federal NDP and the Liberals this week on setting out our national pharmacare framework. The CBC's Meg Roberts takes us through how the plan is causing both optimism and concern.
As the government makes plans to roll out its new pharmacare program, healthcare professionals are eager to see the details.
Politicians don't necessarily always have the best ideas when it comes to implementing healthcare. They may have the right intentions, but implementation is very different from thoughts.
Not much has yet been released. Draft legislation announced yesterday included coverage for contraception and diabetes treatment, a decision some doctors say will be the difference between life and death.
When I write a prescription to my patient, it is up to their economics and their coverage to see if they can actually fill that prescription. I don't think we will understand how powerful this policy is until 20 to 40 years down the road.
But there's concerns about what may be left out.
There's a panel of people who are listed in the report.
Dr. Nav Prasad was an advisor on establishing a list of medications that could be part of a pharmacare program. He wants to see conditions like asthma and mental health disorders addressed in the plan, and is looking for a timeline as to when the government will include more medications for other illnesses.
I think it could be a really important sign and the start of a really big change, but one that needs to come really quickly.
He says the government has already waited too long to implement a national pharmacare program, which is why he wants to see legislation that would make the plan everlasting.
I think there is a concern that that if the government were to change in the future, that advances that we might see in terms of including medicines in our publicly funded system could be undone.
Organizations like Diabetes Canada tell CBC News it's waiting on further details before commenting. That legislation needs to be tabled by March 1st as part of an agreement between the Liberals and the NDP. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Toronto.
You're looking at a live shot of BC Place this hour, and parts of the province are bracing for a bit of a winter wallop. When and where that snow is set to fall, with your 5-day forecast next. And we've got a blustery system that's making its way towards BC. Let's see how that's going to unfold tonight. First, we'll see that with precipitation on the coast, with rain showers heavy at times overnight and into tomorrow. Same thing for the interior. That could come down as some possible snow flurries as well. And we do have a snowfall warning in effect for the Peace region. 10 centimeters is on the way there, and a rainfall warning as well for the eastern Fraser Valley in particular, all the way to Hope, up to 50 millimeters over the next 24 hours or so. So we could see heavy downpours, flash floods, pooling water, the like. Here's what's causing it. This is that big frontal system that's moving in off the Pacific. You can see it's kind of coming north to south and west to east. And as we see that unfold, we'll see it, as we said, in the mountain areas. We do have snowfall warnings in effect as well for the mountain passes, the Coquihalla, the Hope Princeton, the Rogers Pass. Could see up to 50 centimeters of snow into tomorrow. Here's how it's going to look tomorrow for the forecast. Again, most of BC is going to see some form of precipitation, but it will likely taper off by afternoon and then clear up a little bit more on Monday as well. So here's our 5-day forecast for Metro Vancouver. Rain, it's not as daunting as it looks. By Sunday, we should see some breaks of blue sky for Monday as well. And still quite seasonal for our temperatures, but it could get quite windy as well. So definitely some stormy weather in store. In Alberta, law enforcement teams from across that province felt the chill today as they braved the elements. As the CBC's Helen Pike explains, they gathered in Calgary for the annual Polar Plunge in support of Special Olympic athletes.
Special Olympic athletes and law enforcement officers are carrying the flame of hope across the province, headed for the opening ceremonies. But first, a pit stop or plunge in Calgary. Karen Dommett is the general manager of the Special Olympics Canada Winter Games here in Calgary.
Despite the cold, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Her team was led by athlete ambassador Lianka Kalua, who competed in the Special Olympics for 21 years and is a pro at the Polar Plunge.
Lianka threw down the gauntlet during an executive meeting a few months ago. I think this is her 11th plunge.
Techniques across teams vary, with some stripping down. Haley Ashton jumped in with Calgary police recruits.
First time doing it for me. A couple other people have done it before. Did you use shoes or no shoes? Yeah, shoes.
Opening ceremonies for the 2024 Special Olympic Winter Games are in Calgary Tuesday. Helen Pike, CBC News, Calgary.
And that is your late news for this Saturday, February 24th. For news anytime, anywhere, you can download the free CBC News app, and you can always find us online. We're at cbc.ca/BC. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.